Hey everyone, Chad Kalaher, Field Agronomist for Beck's Hybrids in East Central and Northeast Illinois. Today I want to visit with you about a challenge that I got a call on last fall. In this field behind me, you can see this was corn stalks last fall or last year. And after harvest, this field had an order of 2 tons per acre of lime to be applied. Now, this field, actually, when the lime truck came out, the operator did not realize the hydraulics had an issue and there was no fan operation to spread that lime out over that 60-foot swath width. So the equivalent of 2 tons per acre was applied in a very narrow 5 to 6 foot band, basically where that truck drove every 60 foot across this field. So we have concentrated bands that will probably promote a high pH. And then we also have the middles of those bands that did not receive much lime at all. In fact, very little or none. And we probably see quite a bit of a difference in pH there with soil pH. The recommendation last fall was to do some aggressive tillage on this field to try to start the process of spreading that concentrated band out across the field. So this was worked last fall on a strong angle with a disc gripper. And as you can see behind me, this has had some spring tillage here, one pass with a field cultivator in the opposite direction to kind of spread that out as much as possible. So this field's going to get planted to soybeans. Now in East Central and Northeast Illinois, we don't deal with a lot of high pH. And when I say high pH, really anything low 7, 7.5, 8, even higher than that. In other parts of the Midwest, there's soils that people deal with high pH on a regular basis, year in, year out. In our area, we deal with usually spots where there's high pH in fields, and we tend to see some issues there. But in this field, I think we're going to see some concentrated bands, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. But when we think about planting soybeans, one of the things we have to think about is iron deficiency chlorosis. As we have high pH and high calcium carbonate near the roots of a soybean plant, that really slows the process of the roots being able to excrete the acid that will allow the iron to be taken up by that soybean root for the plant needs. Now there's a couple pictures on your screen, as you can see, of iron deficiency chlorosis. You can see that yellowing, the interveinal chlorosis between the veins staying yellow. A couple pictures there for you to look at of fields that have had iron deficiency chlorosis. So one of the recommendations would be, after this tillage is done like this, to help spread that out and try to minimize the effect of that lime spreader going in 60-foot bands with just a concentrated band across there, is to pick varieties that have a good iron deficiency score. Now we have some varieties that have an 8, for example. Those would be ones to really consider where you do have possibility of very high pH, like I think we're going to find in this field. The other thing to think about is herbicides. So there's certain chemistries of herbicides that whenever we have high pH, above 7, 7.2, 7.3, and even higher, we want to try to avoid the use of those products because it can affect the plant growth this year with the soybeans, and it can affect the carryover of those herbicides. So in particular, the one that comes to mind the most is an ALS type herbicide, and that one is chlorimuron, or commonly known as Classic. So in the pre-emerge application here, I would definitely recommend staying away from any product combinations that contain the herbicide Classic. The other thing I would recommend is to keep the Syncor or the metribuzin component a little bit on the lower side, because as we see high pH bands, we can see more injury from the metribuzin or the Syncor component whenever we hit those high pH bands. So those are just a couple recommendations that I have in this situation. What I'm going to do is to go across this field, take soil samples in those bands, in the middles, and also take them in between where that truck drove, so in the middles where they did not apply or that did not get spread with the fan, and see what the difference is if we're looking at, say, a 6 to maybe a 9, or if we're looking at, say, a 6.5 or a 7 up to maybe an 8.5, or see what that difference is. It'll be an interesting challenge and a test to see what happens here in this field. So follow us along this year, check back, If you have any questions about iron deficiency, chlorosis, or some of those herbicide questions for concentrated bands or high pH soils, please contact your local Beck's representative. Thank you very much.